Okay, as welcome as people are coming in, I want to welcome those that are viewing online this morning. It's good to have you joining us. We are at Our Savior's Lutheran Church this morning, and this is an introduction to Sacred Ground, a small group experience as we embark on a journey of discovery, and we'll talk about what that is all about this morning. For those of you that are going to be tuning in, this will also be recorded, and you can watch it online later as well at our website. Sacred Ground. A different world cannot be built by indifferent people.
We're starting class. Bring the conversation down.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Welcome everyone. As you're gathering, as people are getting settled, I just wanted to draw your attention to one item, and you're going to hear some more about it at the end of today's presentation. This is an introduction to Sacred Ground. You're going to find out more about Sacred Ground, and we're going to be integrating this with, you're going to hear from two bishops this morning. The presiding bishop of the Episcopal Church, Michael Curry, who's going to introduce us to this concept of sacred ground, which originated with the Episcopal Church. It was to help members of the Episcopal Church really take a deep dive into what racism in this country is all about, and both looking at their personal history as well as history of your community, of your nation. And they have put together an amazing group of resources, from videos to reading material. And we're going to be talking about that a little bit this morning. The other presiding bishop you're going to hear from is Elizabeth Eaton, our presiding bishop of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. And she's inviting us to do a deeper dive into our relationship with our Indigenous neighbors. And you might recall that it'll be almost a year and a half ago, we had members of the Upper Tulalip tribe, Upper Skagit tribe with us, and we began to talk about our Indigenous neighbors. And you might remember that our congregation passed a resolution, two resolutions, one encouraging our synod to adopt our resolution, which was to invite our congressional delegation to pass a bill before Congress at the time to set up a commission of healing and reconciliation regarding the Indian schools throughout this country, the boarding schools that were established for Indigenous people, and then also to recognize the Duwamish tribe. And those both went to our synod council and were passed. And as a result, our synod now is encouraging us to build on relationships with our Indigenous neighbors. And Bishop Eaton is going to be inviting us into that journey as well. So we're going to combine these two journeys. It's a journey into understanding what racism is really all about in this country. We touched on it a little bit. We've had some classes on it, but this is a chance for a small group to go deeper and for us to share personal stories, as well as to get to know our Indigenous neighbors as well as part of that discovery. But anyway, I wanted to just draw your attention to this article that was in the Seattle Times on Monday, that the Interior Secretary, who happens to be an Indigenous person herself, Interior Secretary Deb Haaland, was here to meet with the Tulalip tribe and to talk with more than 100 survivors in the 12 tribe of the boarding schools. And it's titled A Road to Healing. She has been involved in a lot of work right now, investigating the boarding schools here in this country. And she established her own commission, which has been investigating these schools, 408 federally supported boarding schools in this country, 408. Anyway, we'll explore some of that later on in our time together as a small group. But I want to, again, welcome you to this introduction of Sacred Ground. And we're going to start by hearing an introductory video from Michael Curry about what Sacred Ground is all about.
Sacred Ground is a video dialogue series on race and faith. Through the stories of our culture, the stories of our sojourn here in America, the stories of race, both the joys and the sorrows, by listening to those stories and hearing them, and then telling our own stories together, and then looking possibly at the stories of our very faith. Somehow from the travail and the reality of all of those stories may emerge hope for a new day. I'm reminded that in the 3rd chapter of Exodus in the Hebrew scriptures, when Moses climbed up Mount Sinai, and he was trying to discern whether he should go back to Egypt to help to free the Hebrew slaves, he climbed up on the mountain and saw a burning bush. And in the vision of this burning bush, he heard the voice speak to him, Moses, Moses, take off the shoes from your feet, for the ground on which you are standing is holy ground, sacred ground. And then the voice from the bush said, I am the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. A friend of mine many years ago preached on that text. And he said the reason that Moses was summoned to take off the shoes from his feet, because the ground on which he was standing was holy ground. Not because the dirt was holy, but because God was about to tell his story. And whenever someone tells their story, you are standing on holy ground. Sacred ground is a time, an opportunity to hear the story of our past with regard to race, to hear our stories of our past, and then to write a new story for a new future where there's plenty good room for all of God's children. God love you. God bless you. And may God hold us all in those almighty hands of love.
So this program was initially launched by the Episcopal Church as part of their initiative called Becoming the Beloved Community, to discover what God had intended for us to be as God's beloved community, as a people of grace and faith and love. And to do that, we have to recognize the sin of racism and to somehow move beyond that. Next slide. I'll share screen. Oh, there we go. Okay. So next screen. It's not advancing. Yeah, here we go. Okay. So what we intended to do in this country is to whitewash our history. And we see, unfortunately, a number of state legislatures across this country right now that are limiting what teachers can teach in the classroom, and particularly in some of the red states where they can no longer talk about a Black history. So, kind of whitewashing our history. I was attending a webinar recently that was being sponsored by Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. It was the Center for Faith and Justice, which is the executive director, used to be the head of Sojourners. Wallace, Jim Wallace.
There we go.
Anyway,
Shared memory.
thank you. Jim Wallace, and anyway, he's been doing a series now, and I've signed up for this series, and this was an African American professor, and she was talking about racism in this country, and she talked about the fact that the problem for those of us that are white, and you can look around this room, that means all of us here, we have been looking through a particular lens, and it's a white lens. That everything we see, I mean, it's not good or bad, it's just what it is. We've grown up in a culture that has been a culture of white privilege. And we've all been beneficiaries of that white privilege. And so when we look through our white lens, it's hard for us to kind of get our head around what it's like to be a person of color in this country and the damage that's been done over the years because of this sense of white superiority. Even though, many of us will say, well, I'm not racist. I have people of color that are friends. But what we don't recognize is it's the culture that's embedded in who we are ever since the beginning of this country. When white Europeans came here with a sense of superiority, that white was the superior race. And we talked about in some of the classes I've done, the doctrine of discovery that was established by Pope Nicholas V, saying that that the white Christians in Europe can go into any country where there's not a Christian, and you can take it over. You can subvert the natives. But what happened with the native people of North America? There were over 12 million people of various tribal nations when the Europeans first came to this country in the 1600s. Do you know how many people of native heritage were left by 1890 out of 12 million?
600,000.
148,000. I mean, we basically decimated. I mean, it's genocide, right? And that happened worldwide. So it's hard for us to get our heads around that. But in some ways, we need to be thinking about how do we look through a different lens, a multicolored lens, not a white lens. And so that's part of what this small group experience is designed to do, is to help us through videos and through sharing stories, through reading articles and listening to other people's stories, to help us see in new ways, to see with a new lens, to see in new ways, to see with a new lens. Sorry to the folks out there, I get a little excited about this. And it's, again, moving beyond a whitewash of history. Terrence McKinley writes in his article, Refusing to Erase the Tragedies of U.S. History, one of the greatest obstacles we face as a nation is related to the lack of collective knowledge we have concerning our history. It's time to confront the cycles of generational trauma that we have continued because this nation has refused to address its past. As people of faith, we must be truth tellers and pursue healing from our brokenness by first addressing our wounds. And again, that's a part of what this is all about. I mentioned that race is a political and social construct from the book Christianity Corrupted, the Scandal of White Supremacy. We read about the fact that racial classifications of the 16th and 17th century considered white Europeans as culturally and racially superior. The theory of race was constructed to keep all other races subjected to one race through oppression. One example, and again, this is from a slide that I used in one of my previous classes. You can see the difference between the colonizer Jesus and the historical Jesus. We brought the colonizer Jesus to America. And it's been a white Jesus. Pastor David alluded to that this morning. Does it look the same as the one from Palestine? They're you know, it's a very stylized Jesus, but we grew up with a white Christian Jesus, patriotic. You know, you can read through the comparisons versus a historical Jesus who's Middle Eastern, brown skin, Jewish, colonized by Rome, justice through restoration instead of justice through retribution, and so on. But again, the difference between the two Jesus, this is something in our history. Many of us remember the Jim Crow era that was with us up through the 60s and the Civil War. From the Civil War time to the Civil Rights Acts of the 60s. So for about 100 years, the Jim Crow era was with us. That suppressed, even though the Emancipation Proclamation and various amendments to the Constitution called for equal rights for all people, there was an effort on the part of the white population to suppress the people of color and to not allow them to flourish. Some of you might remember the Tulsa Massacre. We talked about that in one of our classes, where there was it was called the Black Wall Street. It was a very flourishing African-American community. And the massacre happened. We won't go into all the detail, but there was an African-American man that was falsely accused of rape. He was acquitted, and a white mob came and hung him, and then they went in and basically wiped out the African-American community. It was all out of, you know, the fear and racial hatred. And the tragedy of our history is that Hitler decided that what was going on in America was what he wanted in Germany. And this was the from New York Amsterdam News. Says Germans adopt U.S. Jim Crow, the rigid policy of segregation. Hitler basically took what our policies were in the Jim Crow era and said, this is what we're going to have in Germany. Because again, the Aryan race is superior, and we're going to make sure that the Aryan race is the race that flourishes. That's a part of our history. And I'm just pointing out a few little things that as a reminder to us.
Mark had a question. If race is a historical construct, is that when credence to in saying that we could be colorblind regarding race?
Well, of course. I think that's what I meant when we talk about seeing with a white lens, that we are colorblind. Well, we're blind in a way that we cannot see the way that people of color see. Maybe I'm not interpreting his question. Do you know what he might be getting at?
Mark, you can unmute yourself.
Maybe you can explain, Mark, what you're asking.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead. I thought that I could have this question later after you got done with your stream of thought. I'm sorry I
Okay.
interrupted.
That's fine. We can come back to it. We'll come back to it. We'll have some time for Q&A. Pastor Lenny Duncan, who wrote the book,
Dear church.
Dear Church, she was his publisher, writes, white supremacy is a systemic force in the world that defies God. I believe the only hope for mainline Christianity is to dismantle white supremacy, first in our pews and then in our communities. This is the call of discipleship. Pastor Lenny Duncan is now working as part of the faculty at Pacific Lutheran Theological Seminary in a new certificate program on faith and racial justice. Again, some words for us to contemplate. I love this image. Until we are all free, we are none of us free. And the picture of the three boys and their hands together on the flag. But that's really the goal of beloved community, is where we are all seen as equal, and we are all equal under the cross. It would be nice if we could all be seen as equal in all of our eyes. So what is Sacred Ground? Sacred Ground is a film and readings-based dialogue series on race grounded in faith. Small groups are invited to walk through chapters of America's history of race and racism while weaving in threads of family story, economic class, and political and regional identity. It's an 11-part series based around a powerful online curriculum of documentary films and readings that focus on Indigenous, Black, Latino, and Pacific American histories as they intersect with European and American histories. Sacred Ground is part of the ELCA's commitment to racial healing, reconciliation, and justice in our personal lives, our ministries, and our society. Participants are invited to peel away the layers that have contributed to the challenges and divides of the present day, all the while grounded in our call to faith, hope, and love. I have a handout that I just passed around. You can take a look at that and read through that. It gives you a little bit more in detail about what the spirit of this small group process is all about. Sacred Ground journey at Our Savior's Lutheran Church looks like this. It's a small group experience. It's not a class. We'll be reading articles and doing videos online, and you'll be able to do that at your own pace. So, just in your own home, you can check out some of the articles and view some of the videos. We may do some of that together, but when we come together, it'll be more or less just time for us to reflect on what we have experienced, what we've been learning together, sharing insights and personal stories, and growing together with a multi-lens worldview instead of that white lens, a multi-lens worldview. We're gonna meet for 11 sessions, but the first session is Beth and I are going to invite you for a kickoff barbecue in late August to kind of kick it off, and then we'll have remaining 10 sessions, meeting twice monthly, September through January. The day and time are yet to be determined. I'm going to send out for those of you, sending out a sign-up sheet if you're interested at all in being part of this small group process. Just sign your name and your email and your cell phone, and I'm going to send out a doodle pool so we can determine what's the best day and time. It might be during the week, it might be on a weekend, could be an evening, could be an afternoon. We'll see what works for everybody. I'll be facilitating that, and I did have somebody lined up to co-facilitate, so they had to back out because of some personal issues. So I'll be hoping to tap someone else to help with that. But I'll be taking the lead on facilitating the small groups. Questions about what the process is all about, or about the material?
There's
Jim.
several things that bother me. And I think that this is really important that we do this. But look around the room. What's the age of people? We are maybe experienced through life, and we have seen and are aware of. And that's important, but it's also important that every generation faces the same problem. This has been going on for thousands of years, probably since mankind started. And it's going to continue, but we need to understand it and meet it. Each generation has to do it.
That's right.
And so we somehow need to get some younger people in here too.
That'd be a good goal. If you have, yeah, and invite some, invite a niece, a nephew, yeah, a grandchild.
The other thing that really bothers me is we see through a white lens, and we don't see everything through a black or a brown or red or whatever lens. How do we do this when the groups are afraid to come and meet with us, or we're afraid to go meet with them? I have known people of different races that I got along with fantastically and loved them, and they loved me. I've also had some of them that were terrible. I can tell you some stories of what happened to my nephew. Got beat up in the middle of the school by people that came onto campus were not students, and the anger that they had. And I feel that within each race, there's people that are really prejudiced and people that are willing to learn and to.
Oh, of course.
And I get the picture on this study, and I'm worried about it. Are we only looking through this white lens and trying to see it, or are we encouraging the other lenses to look at our point of view too, and where we came from? And that's the only way we're going to have a meeting, I think.
That's why it's called being a multi-lens worldview, because it's looking through all the different lenses.
Very good. That's better concern of mine.
Yeah, through all the different lenses. Other questions or concerns? Yeah.
I'm following up on Jim. Not all knowing, but I feel as though my lenses have changed.
Mhm.
And I don't know. I feel that I've already been converted and understand where we are. I hope that we spend a lot of time in implementing how are we going to improve this that we admit that we see now through different lenses.
Mhm.
I feel that we quite often come and we study all of this, but then do we really take it out in our lives and implement it? How can we implement what we have now, a new vision? So I hope that we can spend a lot of time on implementing the new vision through a different lens.
I think that's the hope and the goal of this process, is it's not just conversation among us, but that it's something that changes us and changes our community. We're talking about our faith community, so that we can make an impact, both individually, but also corporately on our own larger community. Mark, do you want to join in with any comments or questions? No, okay. We have a sign-up sheet going around if you're interested in the possibility. You're not making a firm commitment today.
What are you having for the barbecue?
And you can even wait until the barbecue before you make a commitment.
That's very important because that's what David said about Israel.
Yeah, I know.
Sarah, has a question.
Sarah.
One of our last classes, we talked about the white Jesus and the dark Jesus. Can we please, as a group, put together a wall in our church, somewhere in the commons, that has pictures of all the dark Jesuses with the white Jesuses, so that when people walk in, they know we know.
You know, one of the most powerful experiences for me is when I was at the Holy Land, and you've been to the Church of the Annunciation in Nazareth, and you walk in there's all these various portraits of Jesus as a baby with Mary around the sanctuary, the interior of the sanctuary, and it's from all over the world. So there's a Chinese Jesus, there's an African Jesus, there's a Latin Jesus, there's a white Jesus, there's a Jesus from India. So the idea is that Jesus is for all races, not just for one.
The LGBTQ ideology, the gay and the lesbian and so on, then we include that as another group, no matter what.
Gay Jesus.
No matter what their color is, they are being persecuted as much as anyone.
Oh, sure.
If anybody can come up with all those pictures, I'll be happy to assemble and display them.
So that could be a goal of our small group, is to put something together.
I think everyone
That'd be a good project.
can research and come up with pictures, and what's it called when you do that? The
Art display.
specific name, but anyway, no, in the art gallery, there is yes, thank you.
Curator, so
I'll be the curator, okay? I'm happy to.
Lee is the curator. So Pastor Sarah has laid out a challenge for our small group, our Sacred Ground small group.
Sorry, you can't do the barbecue.
Unless you have a Jesus, okay.
No.
Yes, please.
Vote to recommend, and I don't know how many people, I read everything. And I give the title or author, this time I have the title, it's Cast.
Cast, yes, Cast.
Yes.
And it's a really
Excellent.
powerful book, well worth reading.
Yes, I think it should be required reading.
Yeah. Well, I'll be sending out a book list. For those of you that want to do a deeper dive, most of us will be, there'll be articles and there'll be videos to view. For those of you who want to do a deeper dive, I'll also have a bibliography of some books similar. And this will be one of them, of course. For those of you who want to go deeper. The idea is it's not just reading articles and viewing videos, but it's also sharing stories, because we all have stories to tell. We all have stories. And again, it's not a class. I'm not going to be teaching. I'll just be facilitating conversation. And the reason I'm going to be looking for a co-facilitator, because if our small group is this large, then we're going to need to be breaking up into a couple of smaller groups. We'll come together for some large conversation, then break up into smaller groups for some more intimate conversation. And we may even end up having to have 2 separate groups on different times. We'll see. This was just an introduction so that you could know what this is all about, what the journey includes, and then for us to come together in August, and we'll put the pieces together in terms of the times we're going to meet.
Being intruding on individuals' feelings, can we present this within groups like the youth, the support to get them, the young adults with the have kids over here? I don't mean the kids, I mean the adults.
Let's start here,
But
Jim.
what I mean is.
And it might build. It might build into that. It might build into that. It might build into that. I mean, I'm gratified that I didn't expect to have this many people here this morning. So I'm glad to see the interest and the concern. And the idea is that this could be a catalyst for some real change and real movement beyond this group.
If you want to get the younger ones, we pick them up with some type of childcare. So that they feel they can't come and not.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
A bigger space.
So I wanted to have you listen to a video now by our Bishop, Elizabeth Eaton, and she invites us into this journey as well, particularly a journey of getting to know our Indigenous neighbors.
I'm very excited to announce the launch of the ELCA's Truth and Healing Movement, an opportunity for this church to increase our understanding of our colonizing impacts on Indigenous people in the past and in the present. In 2016, the ELCA Churchwide Assembly adopted the repudiation of the doctrine of discovery. This action was followed with the ELCA Church Council adoption of the Declaration of the ELCA to American Indian and Alaska Native people. This action recommitted the ELCA to the work of repudiation and lists explicitly the areas and ways in which we shall in fact commit ourselves to this work. The ELCA's Truth and Healing Movement is a way for us not only to participate in the national Truth and Healing Movement, but also to spend the next several months, at least through Advent, providing educational opportunities, as well as opportunities to engage in the movement. We have to be in right and healthy relationships with the Indigenous people of Turtle Island. Knowing and embracing the truth is the first step toward healing for all of us. Please join me in this movement, which is not so new to our Indigenous relatives, but is a new opportunity for our church. More information will be shared in the coming days. Stay tuned to our social media channels and elca.org/indigenous for upcoming opportunities to get involved.
So we'll be introducing some of that material, and so that you're aware of that opportunity as well as part of this small group experience. Any other thoughts or questions? How far has the sign-up board gone around? Okay, so be sure before you leave, if you're interested, please sign up on the board so that we can be in touch with you, particularly so we can send out the invitation to the barbecue in August. And by the way, this is being recorded so that if there's any of your friends that were going to be here that couldn't make it, they can view it online. This was recorded today for that purpose. But keep in mind, because this is a small group, this is not a class, so we'll not be offering it as hybrid. It's going to be just an in-person. The thing I want to say is that I don't want 10 weeks to seem daunting. I mean, it's going to be approximately every other week, twice a month for 5 months. And if you miss some sessions. We know that life happens, and you can't be at every single session. I mean, try to come to as often as you can. But things happen, and this is not something that's you have to be at every session to know what's going to happen the next time. Each session will be in and of itself complete. And so I just want to put you at ease that if you can't be at every session, it's not a deal breaker. We want you to come as often as you can and participate. And I do think that it's going to be not just a time of discovery, but I think it'll be a time of transformation. And I thank you for your interest in being here today, and I look forward to the journey that's yet to come.
Rick, I've got a question.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited about what you're saying, and I think Lee is right. In a sense, you're speaking to the choir, preaching the choir, because we wouldn't be here if we weren't sympathetic to these issues. And
That's right.
probably smugly think we're pretty good ourselves. It's all you other people, especially the ones that live in the South. But, speaking of Native American tribes, and then there was a reference to a couple of them. But, we've got one that, as the crow flies, is 5 miles from here, a reservation of Tulalip tribe. And there was one of the largest schools and it's, again, not more than 5 miles as crow flies from here. I hope there's a little bit of focusing on those more immediate neighbors of ours at some point in time.
Absolutely right. Yes.
Is there anyone else who wants to sign up?
Okay.
Seems to have been around.
Good. Thank you, Jim. Good. Well, God bless. Have a good week. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. And anybody else that's on the online with us. Have a good week.